welcome to the Thinking Fellows podcast. My name is Caleb Keith, and today I am joined by Scott Keith and Adam Francisco. The Thinking Fellows is brought to you by 1517.org, and we are part of the 1517 podcast network of shows. Go to 1517.org, check out what we have there. There are resources for you, listeners of the Thinking Fellows. We have daily blogs, we have preaching helps, videos, conferences, and a whole lot more. There's over 12,000 pieces of content on the 1517 website that you can either find just from the latest content, or you can use our search. You can filter by date, author, subject, topic, and we have a couple of indices as well. Go check that all out, see if there's a resource there that might help you this week. Okay, we are recording an episode today on it'll be a question, but it'll be about the death of the university. And my question to you two, who have, I think enough experience in this realm to answer this question, or at least speculate with authority.
Speculate with authority.
Yeah. Is the question, is the university dead? I think we see a lot of, there's a lot of issues with just university education. I think more and more Americans in particular are getting frustrated with the state of university education. It certainly gets blamed for a lot of negative social change and impact in the United States today, but also there seems to be a system where people feel trapped to it, where you feel like you have to go, or you have to still encourage your kids to go to college or university, but the costs maybe don't outweigh the benefits, or they do outweigh the benefits. So how do we judge this? And I guess the question is the idea of the university, or is the heart of the university still there in the midst of all of this?
I was when you asked the initial question, is the university dead, or however you put it, I was thinking, because Scott and I, your dad and I, have spent a lot of time at university. It's as students, and then on faculties and staff and administrations and so on. We got to be a little careful though, because our experience is kind of, it's niche, as private Christian universities, minus a grad school stuff, was that small little university in Oxford, England. But the unknown actually happens to be, I think, for the fifth year in a row, rated the top university in the world. So,
good job.
Or a fist bump to you, Scott.
Coming back up in the world.
But as you asked the question, I was thinking, I guess it all depends on what is the university. But what you could say, I think, just like the phrase you use is the idea of a university. The old classic idea of university is, if not dead, pretty close to it. But there are I think there are some valiant efforts today to try to reconstruct it or reconstitute it, but it's pretty few and far between. Most universities, whether I don't know so much about public universities. I think those are totally different things. But the universities that are in the sort of realm or on the radar of Christians who are wanting a sort of classic, and by that I don't mean like classical ed, but a classic university. Those, there's not a whole lot to choose from.
It was funny. I was watching some news program the other day, and it had one of the swimmers on, the female swimmers that was on the team with the Leah Thomas person.
Individual.
And what all she was saying about that doesn't really matter at the end of the day. But one of the things she just very sort of matter-of-factly said was, you go to the university to get a job. That's why you're there.
Oof.
And I just thought, well, that's very much the sentiment. And if that's your understanding of it, in a sense, it's not dead. It's just way more expensive than it should be to get a certification, to get a job. And it's kind of funny, because what has happened once that mentality has come along is that so many more jobs now require, at least on the job advertisement, require a university education for reasons that confuse me sometimes. I think that is sort of like a cart and a horse kind of thing. Like when did this start, and did the one thing lead to the other? Did the job qualification become the bachelor's degree because everybody was going to get a bachelor's degree so that they could get a job, or did the qualification start first so then that people went to go get the bachelor's degree so they get the job? But what you find now is that you can be in a job that, that's a non-specific job that doesn't really even have a major that would be attached to it. But if you go get a degree, if you already have the job, you get a raise. If you get a master's degree,
Yes.
you get another raise.
Yes.
And so these just kind of become like benchmark life, steps that you take so that you can get a job or not. And I've seen this even in our family life. Like I have 3 kids, 2 didn't get degrees, 1 did. And the jobs that are available at the pay rates that are available to the ones that didn't get degrees, the jobs that are available to them are fewer and the pay rates are lower. Even though the jobs aren't anymore that they're taking aren't any more or less helpful or useful or good for society, or in fact, a lot of times the jobs that like my son Joshua takes are more useful for society on the whole.
You're saying that podcasting isn't useful for society? What?
And pay a lot less, and it's an interesting thing to me. And I think part of, for Adam and I, especially sort of being taught what the university should be by Rod Rosenblatt, I'll claim that for myself. I assume that's true for Adam. When we were asked this question, we have the 2 things in our mind, like that idea that Rod proposed to us, and then the reality that we've seen by being in university administration, that most university students do see it as a pathway to growing up after high school, to experiences for the 4 years after high school, and for the certification that will allow them to make more money than the dude or the lady that didn't go get this degree.
Yeah, I was going to add what you just talked about, because I actually think people who, and especially like recent graduates who say it's to get a job, but also complain about the expense, which is just about anybody, and also parents or people who are footing the bill complaining about the expense, but talk about it as just a means to getting a job, is pretty disingenuous, because most states, I won't say all, I've heard of some examples, but most states have an in-state tuition program or something similar to this that is actually not very expensive. People end up chasing expensive undergraduate experiences because of things like sports, because of things like experiences, or that's where my parents went, or we have a family legacy here, or my friends are going to this school, or it's the only one that I'm comfortable going to, or in my case, or a lot of people's case, it's got the religious affiliation that I'm looking for. And so the expense is taken on, I think, because of preference and experience and those kinds of opportunities, less than the job market, because the job market does not seem to distinguish between like a good humanities degree, a state school, or even like a cheap online, barely accredited program.
Right. That is absolutely correct.
And so
that is absolutely correct. The job market, unless I would say there are going to be niches, I believe, where this really, really matters, where you went and what program you were in. Probably, like if you're trying to get a very prestigious residency, the medical school that you attended matters a lot. And then to get into that medical school, the undergraduate program you were in probably matters a lot too. And the same thing I would say with, your undergraduate, the rigor of your undergraduate degree might matter for getting into like a Yale or Harvard Law. And then having been at Yale or Harvard Law will probably matter for getting into a prestigious firm or political opportunities or whatever like that. But beyond those sort of, and I've heard the same thing for veterinary school, by the way.
Huh.
Yeah,
actually
besides
heard
those-
it's harder to get
Really?
into. Yeah.
Really?
Other than those really niche things, like for your kind of basic, for instance, I'll give myself as a for instance. When you were a child, Caleb, I worked for the Carson City Department of Parks and Recreation as a division manager in the recreation department.
Were you like Leslie Knope?
I was actually, and I was a little less pro-government. I was more like Ron Swanson, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But at the end of the day, that job required a bachelor's degree, right?
They didn't care that it was in theology.
They did not care that it was in theology and philosophy from a small Christian liberal arts college in California.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's just sort of, and they just wanted a degree. Now, if you ever watch the show Tulsa King, Sylvester Stallone has a good sort of diatribe on why this matters to employers. And basically his point is that it matters to employers because it shows that you can aim yourself at a goal for 4 years and finish a goal. Mm-hmm. And if you can do that, you might be able to aim yourself at a goal in a workplace and finish that goal. Okay. But again, if you're doing that at a private liberal arts school at $60,000 a year, that might be a tough choice.
This part of the conversation is what sort of leads me towards the dead thesis, which is there's always been a career path, even for people who are like pursuing the long study, even for, especially for people who are going master's degree, PhD, whatever. That career path might have always been envisioned as one in the university then, like as a professor, as a researcher, or as somebody doing those kinds of things. So career path's always been part of it. The what makes it feel dead is that there's always been a secondary aspect, or you might even call it the primary when we talk about what I said at the beginning, which is the idea of the university, which is outside of the career path, why are students there? And we used to call this the idea of the university. It had to do with the formation of ideas and virtue and the study of the humanities and of human history and thought and being a well-educated, well-informed citizen and those things. Now there are a bunch of secondary things, but in my experience and in my estimation, it's extend adolescence, get drunk and party without my parents, have as many youth experience as I possibly can, figure out what my love life's like, have this sort of all within a safe, supposedly safe, I'll put safe in quotes, but contained space where I don't have to deal with the consequences of if I did those things as an adult who has to foot my own bill and place in this world. It's a contained space for me to, explore, quote, adulthood and make these mistakes or whatever. And to me, that being the secondary or the primary benefit of college to people is what makes it feel dead, or in fact has killed it, is the inability to filter or direct a student body towards the idea of the university. Instead, allow it to be a safe house for extended adolescence.
Yeah, I think in many ways universities are creatures or creations of the culture they serve. So certainly the modern university, right? So for people like us, I'm guessing, who have a picture of the university that's shaped by like the history of the university, where, back centuries ago, up until maybe, I guess, the 19th century, theology was the queen of the sciences, or the queen of, the capstone of all study. And you needed a theology to unite all the other particular disciplines so that you could see them aright and so on. But when Western civilization or culture moves away from that, those, and I'm going to use a term that you're probably going to balk at, but you're just going to have to let me roll with it. When it moves away from those metaphysical or theological underpinnings, and materialism emerges as sort of the dominant worldview in the 19th century, it's really no wonder that the universities might veer off in this direction, I guess. So, it might just be, and this is I'm being kind of tongue in cheek here. Maybe our expectations are too high. Like, does that make sense? Like American culture is a trash. Some people say they call it trash world or whatever. I think is a sort of trope that some of the I don't know what Kayla would probably have the right term, like the Twitter bros or whatever they.
Well, you just call it like the disenfranchised, black-pilled,
okay,
dissenting,
whatever that means. But I mean, so that and if universities are a lot of them are, like especially private ones are so dependent on tuition, and they're all scrambling to bring in enough students to pay their basic bills, and that pool of potential college students is declining demographically. It's no wonder then that universities are basically kind of a populist type of institution. They're and having worked, Scott, I'm sure you heard this in like the student affairs side when you were in the administration. When I was working out of a dean / assistant provost, I mean, people openly mocked this vision of a university that you and I probably share. We have similar visions, right? And they mocked it and described it as elitist, as if it was a dinosaur, a relic from the past. And
nobody mocked it in front of me.
Well,
I was the alpha in the room, though. It's okay.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, even at places that are trying to, or that would put themselves forward as a liberal arts institution, a place that is still hanging on to that old vision of education, not just being a way to get a certificate of some sort for a job, but also having a bigger picture in mind. Even institutions that sell themselves that way are in practice, because they have to for their very survival, going the populist route. And it's almost like the claim to be a liberal arts college. There are some that are actually really doing it, but the claim that you see in those among like private universities is mostly just rhetoric. To appease their church body that they're connected to, or something like that.
That's kind of interesting. I would say that the staff that I was involved with, none of them had a familiarity with what we would call the idea of the university. But when I or Scott Ashman or somebody else would come into those settings and try to up the game for them as far as helping develop in them an understanding for what the university is supposed to be, they were actually pretty receptive and usually deferred to. That didn't mean that they gave up all the stuff that I would say was silly, but they usually deferred to me or to Ashman or somebody like that. This is gonna be funny.
Out of fear of the alpha male, or because they recognize there's an inherent authority or something?
I think it was a recognition that people like myself and Scott Ashman have participated in that idea of the university to sort of a larger extent than a lot of them did, and just deferring with knowledge. Now, it doesn't mean that we got rid of everything, but it does mean that I was able to, in a lot of ways, sort of channel some of the things that I thought were silly that we maybe still had to do legally because of receiving federal money and everything, to channel those into a more sort of, in our context, vocational discussion rather than just, hey, we're checking this off a list discussion. I got more resistance from students sometimes, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
When you would start to talk about, what the university should be, would literally say things like, why should I care? I'm just here because my parents want me here, or why should I care? I'm just here to get this certification, or why should I care? I'm just here to play soccer, or why should I care? There was a lot more of that from students than from the student affairs staff, which was kind of interesting. The other thing I would say is I don't know how much, and Adam can make Caleb edit this if he gets too fearful, but where we were, there was an honest attempt before I got there, and I think just before you got there too, Adam, by the faculty to bring in a true liberal arts curriculum to that university that they called the core program, which really did put theology as the queen of the sciences. If you just do it by the numbers, In the theology program for the core, you had to take 4 classes, which I think was greater than any of the other units there for history or literature or science or whatever. I think all the others had 2 required courses, and theology had 4. And it was a real attempt to do that by the faculty, and they passed it and they got it enacted, and it was required for every student that came to the university would take every one of these core classes. Even transfer students had to do a version of it. Transfer students did not like that, by the way, if you taught transfers. They had to do a version of that, a dialed down version, but not dramatically dialed down version of it. And so every student that came to the university had an engagement with a liberal arts curriculum for at least 2 years. What I found from when we were there, Adam was on faculty. I was teaching 2 classes a semester, but also had a staff role as associate dean. And what I found is that what it lacked was buy-in from the staff side. The faculty seemed to be all in. Some of the students that were recruited, like, let's be honest, like debate and former homeschool students that were recruited specifically because of that program were all in. But on the other side, there wasn't complete buy-in on the staff side, which means that you had, like, your admissions department wasn't all in, which means that the students that you were recruiting often didn't even really have a good understanding of what they were getting into, which then if you're teaching like a core 100 level class, you're doing some initial like convincing of how important this is in the first 2 weeks of class, because they're like, what the heck am I doing? I mean, you get a student that's recruited to come play basketball, doesn't know much about the university, and all of a sudden find out that they have to take core theology and New Testament in the same semester. And to put it kindly, they're often surprised.
Yeah. They've never read a full book, right, in high school, and then all of a sudden they're reading. I don't know what you guys read in theology, but in their core history, they're reading Herodotus. It's like, or Virgil's Aeneid, or whatever. Yeah.
Well, they'll be reading Luther and Augustine and some Aquinas in the theology reader.
You let that pass. Aquinas?
I know. It's Aquinas, yeah. I didn't develop the reader.
Must have been another cryptotomist.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. And then, like, on the proverbial street, then you get students commiserating with staff who have not bought in, and there's this sort of groundswell and bitterness.
Can I say, especially in like not like the psychological counseling, but the other sort of, what do they call it? Is counseling?
Oh, like student advising.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I've definitely sniffed out some commiserating in the advising department.
Yeah, what's that? There's a phrase, something is policy, and now I can't remember. It's like basically suggests that when you hire, understand you're not just hiring a person to, obviously, right, fill a role to do a niche thing, but you're actually hiring a person who's going to, in some way, play a role in the development, reinforcement, execution of policy. Like one time, years and years ago, Larry Arnn at Hillsdale, my good friend Larry, actually, I had a conversation with Larry Arnn for about 2 hours, and he said to me, he goes, Adam, what a lot of people don't understand is that when you hire somebody, whether it's faculty or staff or anywhere in between, you need to be able to trust that not only are they competent in their particular thing that they're going to be doing, but that you can trust that when they vote, like at a faculty senate or something like that, that they have the whole university and ultimately its mission and vision in mind. And so there's got to be, now how do you? That's really hard, especially if your mission or vision is very niche, right? But that's if you don't pursue that, you get what you got now is
Well, and I think
faculties and staff in these silos, that.
To be honest with you, from what I've heard, that university where, they're trying to do that, and I think at the time they were trying to do that too. it's just hard. This is the thing. It's like it's so few people, even among faculty, probably to some degree, in different parts of the faculty. This would vary to some degree. They just, not everybody, when you say, is the university dead, not everybody's talking about the same thing.
Right.
And that's the issue. And now we're making this conversation very niche about, liberal arts universities, specifically small Christian liberal arts universities. And even in that little niche of a small Christian, this is self-stated identity, small Christian liberal arts university, even in that little niche, when you say university, not everybody's thinking the same thing in their head. Even when you say liberal arts, not everybody's thinking the same thing in their head. Again, that's why I think CUI did a very good job with the core program and putting it together and trying to get everybody to buy in. And honestly, as far as like legacy institutions changing things at one point and trying to get everybody to buy in, they did a very good job getting a large percentage of people to be on board with that. Kudos, to be honest with you. It's just when you kind of got behind the scenes, you could actually see the unfortunate reality that this is a group of people trying to breathe life back into the idea of a university. And because so many people didn't understand what that was, and not everybody was, really rowing at the same rate when it came to that. And
it probably, to be fair to people, it probably would have been hard to fill the student body with even 60% of students who wanted that, 50% of students who really wanted that. It would be a very difficult challenge. It would take a different kind of marketing, a different kind of recruitment, to the point where you're right. Like, the amount of buy-in administration-wise or staff-wise first before executing that had to be so high to get a student population that succeeded at that or transformed that.
And you would have had to have a sense of confidence that you even could. And I think that's more on that side, more what was lacking, just a lack of belief that there was even that many students out there that you could recruit to that thing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I mean, this was before the vibe shift that we're in now in a lot of ways. And I would bet that they are really, really focusing on that now. I'm not privy to it, but I would guess that they are, because this is a strike while the iron's hot kind of moment, I think. But so is it dead? It's not dead, maybe, but it's difficult to find one that, if you're talking like the John Henry Cardinal Newman idea of a university out there, can you find them? You can. Are they everywhere just because they have the word university attached to their name? No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Can I say the reason that this topic came to mind for me, why I put it on a list, was, first off, I knew it was one the two of you could talk about for a long time and give well-informed answers. But second is, I know a lot of parents, so young parents my age who have little kids, who we all just, it's longer now that I think about it, it's kind of weird that it's almost like 10 years, but it seems like we were just in university pretty recently. And then some older parents with some older kids. And I would say the general sentiment is, if you ask, do you want your kids to go to college? Most people go, I don't know. And it feels weird. And it's funny, especially for those of us who in the last couple of years just graduated or just got a master's degree or have gone through that process. A lot of my friends are pastors or have some sort of graduate work as well. And so you have people who, finish high school, finish well at the university, get a graduate degree. And when they think about the future for their children, like, the university is like I kind of would like it, but I don't know where I would send them, because it seems like a risky proposition, or it seems like a bad value proposition. And it's a lot of parents, and that's anecdotal for me, but especially Christian parents, they feel like the cultural realities of the university are that your child will not come out with a humanities education and become a well-informed, virtuous citizen, but the exact opposite will happen, that they will increase in degeneracy tenfold by being exposed to the university, and that's the fear everybody has. So,
you weren't speaking autobiographically.
I don't think so.
I like how you put it, though. That's hilarious.
Yeah, well, he went to the university and got married before he graduated.
You
so
were
I'm not
there,
sure.
so
The increase in degeneracy was probably not a thing. It's kind of funny. We talked very early on about, what the thing we're niche talking about, the private Christian liberal arts college is very expensive. And I think it was Caleb said, you can go to a public university for a lot less money, and you can. And we actually, in our orbit, have somebody who did just that. She works in our development department. She went initially to her local community college for 2 years, and then to the local state college to finish her bachelor's degree, and now is at a private, pretty elite-ish West Coast graduate program, all in the field of, more generally political science, probably.
Yep.
And I remember when she was, especially when she was at the state school, finishing, less so at the community college, more so at the state, 4-year college, finishing up her bachelor's degree, would talk about how just ultra liberal the bias and everything was, not just from the faculty, but from the staff and from her fellow students. Now, this is an individual. I have not met a stronger willed individual in my life than this person ever. And so
she was unfazed.
She was unfazed by this. And now that she's at this kind of rather elite West Coast graduate program, she loves it, and she loves it because she actually feels like it's the first time she's gotten anywhere near a liberal arts education that will actually make her engage with both sides of the argument, not just confirming her biases as a very conservative person, but also makes her engage more intellectually and more thoughtfully with the other side of the aisle too. And she really appreciates that. But I would say, just that's anecdotal. It's not the only anecdotal experience I've heard from this, but from her experience, if she weren't so strong-willed, and had gone into that program and hadn't also surrounded herself, with being involved in one of those young conservative, I forgot which one it is, organizations.
Young
Americans for Freedom.
Yeah. That she would have been like an island and an attacked island. And if you're not a person that can withstand that, it would be, for a parent sending your kid off there, that would be kind of,
even if you're not afraid,
not very enticing.
That they, fall to the other side of the argument, it's at least sort of like an odd experience for them, sort of getting beaten into silence for a lot of people, or just, not learning how to converse with those ideas, but just keep your ideas to yourself and keep your head down. And there's a lot of people like that, all over the country post-university too, in workplaces and things like that. There were a lot of memes going around when Trump got elected that were people saying, I got to pretend like I don't like this at the office today, or else I might have an HR meeting, And if you carry off that sentiment from the university, it's not just about being afraid that my children might change their minds or drop my values for the values of the world or something like that, but that constant bombardment doesn't teach them how to live their ideas, or to speak their ideas, or to debate their ideas. It just teaches them how to keep your head down. And I'm not sure that's what Christians in particular, whether you want to get into the more politically conservative liberal stuff, but just Christian values and Christian teaching in particular, I'm not hoping that the next generation of Christians just simply learn how to keep their head down, but how to sort of confidently talk about their faith in private and in public.
Well, interact with the world vocationally as a Christian, not vocationally as a not Christian, that just doesn't work. So, yeah, talking to her is always really interesting, just because of how sort of enthralled she is with like an actual liberal arts education now. And again, she's now encountered a university. as a university is, intended to be an educational endeavor that broadens your mind, broadens your horizons, teaches you hopefully to think critically, teaches you to research well, refines. I'm not going to say teaches you to write because it does, but boy, the elementary writing tutorials are really rough. Helps you to refine your thought process, your process of argumentation, which then feeds into your ability to write well and to communicate well. These are all part of it, and this isn't. So we're very much not focusing on what I think probably a lot of these institutions still do pretty well on the STEM side. Was it science, technology,
engineering
and mathematics? And that's a whole different ballgame. Like if somebody were to tell me, hey, I would really like to be a structural engineer, do you think I should go to college? My answer is yes. Yeah,
I think you have to go to college to get that.
But if somebody tells me, I really want to be a writer, do you think I have to, or I want to get a job in the business world, do you think I have to go to college? I say, well, I mean, probably, but if you're going to go into that, just like general business, maybe look at doing the sort of most cost-effective version of getting that certification, because that's what you're looking at now, a certification as you can. If somebody says, and here's the interesting one that you don't hear a lot anymore, I really want to be the most well-rounded, educated historian that I can be. Should I go to college?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Because, the will in Good Will Hunting is right. You could get this education for $1.25 in late fees at your public library, but you're probably not going to self-motivate yourself enough to find out the text that you should read and to sort of drive every day like you do when these drives are assignments that are attached to papers that get attached to grades, that get attached to transcripts.
Yeah, and the conversation and
the conversation.
I would say the conversation and the testing, the pressure of putting those ideas into practice is still good at the university.
The ability to ask professors questions when you don't understand some of the readings. Boy, isn't that
review
nice
of your
when that happens, Adam? When somebody actually asks you a question because they read some of the assigned reading and they had a question, isn't that just
hasn't
wonderful?
happened for a while, but yeah, it is nice. Yeah, there also, if you have the time and space, let's say you don't have these looming obligations where you got to pay all sorts of bills and things. It's not like you have to do college right out of high school or whatever. You could do gap years or, I know, Scott, you're going to kind of say or think to yourself, Adam, why do you have to bring these things up? But I think military service is a good option if you're looking to find out who you are.
I don't disagree. I mean, I talked with you about it with Joshua when he was 18.
I mean, there are things. One has to go in like with clear-eyed expectations, right? But I mean, there's all sorts of things one can do as they're trying to figure out whether or not they really want to or need to go to college. It's I know. You love these cliches, Scott, but life's not a sprint; it's a marathon. You got space and time, unless you don't. If you got to get your law degree because you're going to want to really be a lawyer and you got kids coming and stuff, you probably ought to go and get through it quickly. But
I think that's a really good thing to say, because a lot of students that I encountered at the university kind of felt like, I had to do this now because there's high school and then there's this 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 and then there's this. And you're like, holy moly. Just
yeah. Relax.
Maybe leave life a little unplanned.
My Lord. What the heck?
But I think that's the message that a lot of high schools teach students, because that's how they justify that you're trapped in that building for 8 hours a day, right? Is that this is the first stepping stone to all these things you're going to accomplish and do, and now all of those things have to do with your desires and pure desire, rather than sort of the obligations that you'll pick up as an adult along the way. So it's definitely interesting. Like I think we've talked about it a little bit before, but I like this kind of upspringing of smaller liberal arts universities that have small student sizes, that are not going to accept government money, are saying they're not going to grow fast, are going to stay focused on the mission. I think that's going to be a very interesting thing to explore. There's what's the one in Texas? It's just called Austin University. There's other ones cropping up. My brother-in-law is about to attend one of these in Georgia, I think, too. So like there's a lot of these things around, and also good students, because you guys talked about how good students can and find a good university liberal arts education at a lot of places, because there are still professors, hungry and thirsty to interact with good students and to actually teach. And if a student shows up who does the reading, who asks questions, who comes to office hours, well, that highly motivated student can then meet professors, or a professor who really does change the game for them at a lot of universities, including a lot of Christian liberal arts ones. I would say I was able to get what I wanted from Concordia University Irvine, and a lot of students, or most students, didn't get that same experience that I had, but it was there if you wanted it. And so for parents who ask this question, if you have a student who isn't asking you what college they should go to, is already doing the applications on their own, or has told you what they want to do or study, I think the answer probably is yes, they should go to university, because they're on a mission, and it sounds like you have a kid on your hands who's going to accomplish that task. And so that's different than the kid that you have to like kick out of bed on Saturday morning and say, "Did you apply yet? Did you apply yet? Did you apply?" That kid, probably send them to go get a job application instead. But that
was me
my
at
anecdotal.
18.
No, it wasn't me too. That wasn't me in one sense. Like, I was very motivated. I just was not very motivated to go to college.
Yeah,
but your mom didn't make you go to college, right?
No,
Yeah.
no.
So eventually, when
To
both
be fair
of you went,
to
right?
her and me, she couldn't have made me do anything. So,
I mean, when both of you went, it was, I think, interesting, Adam, that you brought up. Both of you went a little later than straight at 18 for different reasons, and nobody seemingly made you apply or go to the university that you ended up going to.
I was absolutely convinced I would never go back to a classroom again after high school.
There you go.
Yeah. I was just got out of the service and was in Southern California at don't laugh, but at a Vineyard Worship Leaders Conference.
My gosh, Adam.
And my mom happened to, who has like vast networks, because she's German, and she arranged a meeting, like a lunch or something, between me and what was back then the dean of Christ College, which, the theological college there at Concordia University Irvine. And then, I don't know, it was like maybe a week later. This is before internet.
Who was the dean then? Was it Mueller or Dargis?
No, it was Tom Doyle.
No way.
Yeah. And
what year was that?
That would have been like 1997, I think. And
really? Tom Doyle was the dean of Christ College in 97?
He was. And I think the next year's that was.
They back then they had a difference between the department head and the dean, right?
Yeah.
Because Mueller was the dean, or was the
short. It was a little
department head
thereafter.
in 97.
Yeah, he was of theology, but over like all the church work, professional degrees.
Okay. Church work programs in general. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But I think it was like a week later or something, and I guess there was internet back then, so I have no idea how I received it. Maybe it was a phone call. Maybe it was an email, because I had you all laughed that I still have my AOL account, but I don't remember exactly how it all went down, but I just remember I got this communication that says, "Hey, if you want to come to Concordia University Irvine, here's what it would look like in terms of scholarships and stuff. Here's what you end up paying," and blah, blah, blah. And I had no plans whatsoever to go to college. I mean, this literally was like a weekend thing, like for 3 hours maybe. And I was thinking, I might go into commercial diving, like welding and all that stuff and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, okay. Like without even any serious, like, thought, I was like, oh yeah, maybe I'll go study theology there at Concordia Irvine. And then, then they're like, no, you should study Greek and Hebrew. I'm like, oh, okay. And so even it wasn't until I got in maybe a month or a semester in, and I was like, oh, I kind of like this. So, so it could just be, it is kind of a crapshoot whether it's going to really take off or not, So maybe the way to start is at the community college, and to figure out if
That's
you
what
actually
I did.
like that kind of stuff. Yeah,
That's what I did, and ended up in an American history class that was great, and I just thrived in it and loved it, and loved that they treated me like an adult, which was my big problem with high school. Read the book, don't read the book, do the work, don't do the work, show up to class, don't show up to class, whatever. This is, you're paying. And I'm like, okay. Yeah. Now I hate that the university now treats students like high schools, and but whatever.
Yeah.
That's just not what worked for me. It worked for me to finally just put my destiny in my hands as far as my education was concerned, and then I wanted to excel. And history, political science classes on from there, and
I will say, I think a lot of that has to do with that federal and state money, because if they don't meet certain graduation expectations or credit expectations and can report those back to those government agencies, money go bye-bye. And so, like, a lot of the dumbing down and the treating students like kids is because, well, if you don't treat them like kids, the government's not going to give you money for them being there. And, I
they did find fraud, waste, and abuse way back in the early 21st century, with if I'm not mistaken, the requirement now to keep attendance, if you're an institution that takes some sort of federal money, whether it's through loans for students or whatever, was to ensure that foreign students were coming and actually participating in the university, and not just sort of using that as a cover to do naughty things, if you know what I mean. So
encourage, I would say,
this is not this show, but this is an example of policies that apply to everybody to try to fix individual problems, and that drives me crazy.
Yeah,
encourage universities you support or that you attended or you want your kids to support to stop taking government money if you want to fix this problem.
Yeah, good luck.
I think that's they won't do it, but
they can't
be vocal about it.
They can't.
Yeah.
Their budgets have been predicated on the federal dollars since, I don't know what, the 80s, 70s?
Yeah.
A long time.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well,
that was I'm not going to get into it.
Yeah, I mean, we should starting to I'm starting to feel things and feel them strongly.
I'm feeling uncomfortable.
We should probably bring this to an end.
Well, maybe this is a good spot to end the episode then. But well, guys, very good conversation. Definitely interesting. Listeners, are you considering sending your kids to university? Are you a high schooler who listens who's going to go to college? Are you at the university? Does this make sense to you? You can contact 1517.org. And we can't reply to every email, but definitely are interested in some of our listeners' experiences. And so appreciate that sharing with us. You can also put those as comments on posts at 1517, things like that, if you have something to say. So we appreciate your time. We will catch you next week. Bye.